Hi everyone, I hope we're all doing well. Welcome back to WARNO and a deck build. I was going to do the 2nd Infantry, but Protoss beat me to it over at SD League, so do check out his video on the 2nd Infantry. Maybe we'll have a look at my deck for that at the end of this video. But basically I wanted to take a look at the 35th. Obviously there's been a lot of changes to the game in the recent patch, and Infantry are now king once more, as are ATGMs. And you know, tanks a little bit on the back burner. They're still good. They're still tanks, but they're not as strong as they were in the last patch, and let's be fair, they were getting a little bit silly in the last patch. So let's have a quick look through this deck. I haven't changed a huge amount, in all honesty, since I was last messing around with this deck. I have my big hefty choppers with 6,000 supply. I have little command truck. I mean, you know, you can take something else if you want, but there's 3 of them. That's the only reason. It's because I get more of them. If I wasn't taking that, I'd probably take the BRDM because it's fast. It's, you know, it's wheeled rather than tracked. So the amphibious thing I'm not really bothered about, but maybe it comes in handy on certain maps. Maybe you could sit it in the water and hope it doesn't get killed. Infantry. A few changes here. So infantry is obviously good right now. A few changes perhaps in how you will play infantry and what you will take. So, the first thing is, I like to take a command infantry in this deck. I've taken it in a chopper. You know, you might want to do a few shenanigans getting it around the back of enemy points and things. It's a choice that you could make yourself if you're planning to do that or not. Now, Sapri RPO. So, RPOs, your flamethrowers, everything else have all been a bit nerfed. So, their damage has been reduced. And obviously the standard Sapri with the satchel charges have had a massive reduction in HE. Now they're still good, they're just not as good. So I've opted now to just take 1 squad of Sapri RPO. On the basis that I'd still like something that can fight up close in the sense of doing some flame damage, but we've also got the Spetsnaz in this deck for that. So just 1 stack of those. I'm taking the SPG-9 squad because they're still really good. They're still forward deployable. I think they're a really good unit to have in your deck. They still do a lot of damage. Not as good, perhaps, as the first release of Early Access, but still really good units. Spetsnaz goes without saying. 12-man squad. They're, you know, shock troops. They get all those bonuses. They've got the RPO launcher. 2 stacks of those because they're just that good. Definitely worthwhile in the current patch. Desert Nikki. I quite like having just a standard infantry squad, and also the BMD is quite nice. Now, which one you take is up to you. Previously, I always took the BMD2. However, in the latest patch, obviously, there has been a reduction in the HE damage and, I guess, the penetration of those autocannons. So now the debate is, does the main tank cannon technically do more? Now, the nice thing is that actually has a longer range. But I thought I'm going to try the BMD1 out and see if I'm happy with the damage it's outputting. Might not work out, but worth a go. Remember, it's a heat gun as well, so it always does at least 1 damage to tank armor. Designating Metis. Metis launches are pretty darn good, and in the latest patch, they're obviously a lot better because all ATGMs, including the Metis, have had a speed boost and do more suppression damage. Well worth doing. Okay, so definitely 2 squads of those. I loved them anyway. Now there's even more reason to take them. Spetsnaz OP. The RPG-29 squad. Absolutely no reason not to take this. Absolutely devastating close range to enemy vehicles. The range on that is 750 meters. That's pretty darn good. And at the end of the day, now that tanks aren't as good in the forest and vehicles aren't as good in the forest, it's stunning down the infantry. You know, damage or the potential to do damage like this is great. Because this is even going to damage front armor pretty effectively. And then Conkers. Now, the Conkers, I brought them in EWZ just for speed and getting to the front line. As the game is right now, you could even take the BTRD robot. And you get more Conkers with that as well. And you could potentially take something out if you wanted and put in more Conkers, because ATGMs are king right now. But I've got ATGMs elsewhere in the deck as well, and I've got my 2 Metis sets there. You could knock out one of the Metis, I guess, and take more of the conkers if you were so inclined, but I'd still like some line infantry, and these guys kind of fill that role. Commander Tura, I just want to go back slightly to what we've kind of skipped over. Commander Tura, the military police, obviously still have that bonus of removing certain traits, the whole broken trait. Obviously there's none of that in this deck anyway. The other thing is, obviously, they did do a lot of work for suppression and cohesion and stuff. That's still the case, but it doesn't feel quite as important for infantry, so I haven't bothered putting them in. Machine guns, I don't think there's been a huge change in those. They weren't great to start with. They're alright. I much preferred taking the 30mm or 40mm grenade launcher, but they have been nerfed. They're not as effective as they used to be at causing suppression. The suppression distance has been reduced significantly, so not as good as they were, so they've been taken out of the deck. Otherwise, again, you know, you've got these vehicles here. The SPG-9 was at one point really good. I don't think that's quite as funny as a meme anymore. It's just not as effective. Again, grenade launcher not working for me. These guys, they're chopper based. I think if you were doing a 1v1 deck, I think there's something to be said for taking more infantry and choppers, so I'd be then inclined to take these DSH guys, because then they can go in a chopper and possibly even a rocket chopper. But as it stands right now, I mean, obviously the chopper here with ECM would be great. These guys down here, again, it's just, you know, we've got these guys already. The standard doesn't, I mean, if you so wish, they've still got a really good RPG. So if you want more line infantry, nothing wrong with that. These guys, not really fussy. The significant nerf to the sniper weapons, and especially when you don't have the sniper trait, ditch those, not interested. And these guys down at the bottom there, not really that interested. I think there's better squads. Artillery-wise, you can take what you want here. I actually had the Vasilek in my deck, and I've switched it out for the Nona because of the range and the increased damage. So the Vasilek's not bad, don't get me wrong here, but look at the difference in HE damage. 0.9 up to 2.07. And I think right now the 120mm mortar units are just reasonably effective at doing damage even to vehicles if you get a top-down hit. So I think that's probably more worthwhile if you're planning to try and do a little bit of harassment damage. And then when it comes to the artillery, I've literally taken the 122mm cannon, because that's all you get. The grads are garbage. Don't bother with the grads. I would really, if you're going to take artillery, take the tube arty. It's half decent at least. Not as good as the 150mm versions of, but still alright. Tanks is really easy. You take all the T-64s you can. I wouldn't bother ranking these down. I'd still keep them as they are at veteran. You still get plenty of tanks. I'd also take the D-44 cannon until, you know, before it gets nerfed, because right now if you put them in a forest, they're absolutely awesome. And then I've taken the UAZ Conkers just because they hide better. They've got good stealth, whereas the BRDM 2 Conkers has mediocre. So I think just for the fact that these hide a bit better and they're slightly cheaper, I think they're worthwhile. Recon, you have to take the Spetsnaz Gru. You have to take the Spetsnaz Gru. You really, really, really have to take the Spetsnaz Gru. Why? Because they are your ground surveillance radar unit, and ground surveillance radar is king in Recon in this game at the moment. I think I can't decide if it was a mistake adding that or not. I think there's line of sight is, as I've said before, one of my big complaints in the game now, considering how good everything else is getting. Line of sight is still a problem for me, but that, you need ground surveillance radar. If you've got it in your deck, you have to take it, because it makes all the difference. I take the Razvedka, and then I take the chopper. There's something to be said for potentially taking the Mi-24K. I think there's situations and certain games where you definitely want that. I think in a 1v1 situation, I'd be tempted to take that. The only thing is it doesn't have ECM, which is a shame, but at least it's got some firepower if you were moving it up with other attack choppers. Anti-air, I mean, these aren't terrible now because they've all had sort of a buff, but for me, the Strela is still king. I can park it somewhere, leave it, and not worry about it. Afghansky, I think, is the better option in terms of the spag. I've got some standard Iglas in a UAZ just to keep the price down, and I've got some Iglas in a Scrizette. And these can all be forward deployed in this deck, so yeah, these are good units. You could even take more Scrizette, to be honest, but I just did that because I wanted a cheap option in an emergency, and 20 points can make all the difference sometimes. Helicopters, I mean, this is the 35th Airborne Division, so you're going to want plenty of helicopters. And remember that the Akula anti-air has been moved into this section of the deck. So I literally do have some rocket attack choppers. I quite like them. I think they're pretty decent. I've got the Mi-24V rocket. It does have the Concon missiles. It doesn't have ECM is the only thing. Which is the only shame, I guess. If you want ECM, you've got to go up to this one, which costs a lot more. So this is my cheap option. And then my expensive option, which does have ECM, is obviously the Akula and the Akula anti-air. I mean, the Akula anti-air obviously has the Igla. I mean, you're going to bring that in some situations. Maybe when you're dealing with enemy choppers, and it can do damage to vehicles and stuff as well. But the AT is like the big daddy, isn't it? And obviously a controversial unit in the game. Aircraft. MiG-29 anti-air. You need anti-air in this deck. You don't have the best anti-air on the ground. You don't have any Cubs or anything, so you need to bring in something decent aircraft-wise. So the MiG-29s go in, and I also bring the MiG-23s. I want good air cover, and I want spares in case something goes horribly wrong. So I bring both of those. In 10v10s, you won't see me calling in a huge amount of aircraft, because there's just simply too many aircraft to worry about. But in a team game, a smaller team game, definitely be making use of these bad boys. Su-25 AT, I mean, it's a classic. It does a lot of damage. It's very good at killing tanks and helicopters because it's nice and slow and it gets cannon shots. Really good unit. I bring the Seed because in team games, as I say, smaller team games, you're going to be relying a little bit on your aircraft for air superiority and, you know, potentially for helping you kill certain units on the ground as well. HE bombers, because HE bombers are still really good right now, and a laser guided bomber. You only get the Su-25 as a cluster here. I don't think the Su-25 cluster is the best cluster in the world. You get plenty of bombs on it, don't get me wrong, but it's slow. And generally, if you want to kill a tank, you want something that's going to come in fast, dive bomb, and get out. And you just don't have that. So you're better off with the laser guided bombers and the HE bombers. HE bomber will still kill a tank if you get a good hit. And that's the deck. Really, the only thing that's changed is maybe a little adjustment to infantry. Logistics, I think I dropped one stack of these little vehicles because they added more in. Like, a single stack is now 20. I believe that was less before. And then tanks, really the only thing I've changed here is definitely taken the guns, because they're good right now, and also switched to the UAZ just because they're nice and hidden and ATGMs are really good. But otherwise, I haven't changed too much in this deck from, I think, the last time I did it. But let me know down below in the comments what you guys think. What have you put in this deck, and have you had much luck with it in the latest patch? As I say, it does seem to be one of the preferred ones going by the recent tournament. Now, I said at the end we'll have a quick look at my second infantry division. What's changed here? Not a lot. I've still got my 2 Bedford supply trucks. Something to be said for bringing in the Chinook. Some people have had really good success with that, so if that's your thing, do it. Rover command vehicle, just because I get plenty of them. Infantry, I've still got the Royal Military Police in here, but I'm debating whether they should be removed at the moment. SAS are king. They need to be in Saxons, just because of the extra firepower. That's my preference. Assault Pioneers, because you're really limited in this deck. You do not have any really good assault infantry. You don't have any flamethrowers and stuff, so that is your own choice. So I take them anyway, just because it's something at least that does at least get that shock tray. It does have the satchel charges. Milan 2, because ATGMs are king right now. The other option is obviously the Milan 1. It's up to you which you take. You do get slightly more of the Milan 1, but I think the Milan 2 is more worthwhile for the extra damage. The airmobiles are really good right now. I'm taking those in choppers. I'm not a huge fan of taking infantry and choppers in 10v10s. I feel like they're good in small team games and they're good in 1v1s. So definitely if you're in 1v1s, take them in choppers. I leave them in choppers just so I can have the experience of moving them about. It's about practice. For me, the Jaeger, Terriers AT group, and more airmobiles. This time in a Saxon. Just for another option for those. But lots of airmobiles, they're really good right now. Potentially even taking 2 in the Saxons there. Artillery. Basically, I've taken 155mm, 105mm, and Tampella mortars. Not so fussed about this, it flies too slow for me. Tanks, Challenger, Challenger, Challenger. Simple as that. Take some M48s and take yourself the M48 command. Lots of extra commands. Nothing wrong with taking the Milan either, or the Rover Milan, or the Iltis Milan. The Rover Milan obviously gets the Milan too. I definitely consider taking that as well. You could easily drop the M48 command tanks and take that instead. Again, ATGM's being king right now. Here, I've dropped all the Foxes and Ferrets. I've just gone with the Jaeger Avkal because they're really good. The Scouts and the Gazelles. No one here, unfortunately, has any ground surveillance radar. Snipers aren't bad, but the lack of a ground surveillance radar on anything here is very disappointing. So, take what you fancy, move on. Foxes are still okay. You'll see people taking them in the 1v1 still. Anti-air, tracked rapier, rapier FSA, javelin LML. So the standard javelins are 35 points, and you get 6, and they fire 6 per minute. If you've got the javelin LML, you can fire 11 per minute, and you've got more. Basically, they fire faster, they're not too much more expensive. It's now worth taking the LMLs. Helicopters, Gazelle rockets, and Hell Arms. The Hell Arms are much better, they're cheaper now, worth taking. And air, I mean, the Phantoms are okay. The Harrier rocket is good. The Jaguars are all good as well now. I've got lots of Harrier rockets because they're pretty annoying and they do quite a lot of damage. Tornado HE, potentially you could take that. But there you go. 2 decks in one video. How's that? Thanks for watching, everyone. Please do like, share, subscribe. I'll see you all soon for some more WARNO.